Hey, get inspired, everybody. It is time for another episode of Life Inspired. We're so delighted that you would tune in and watch. We have just these great testimonies of what God's doing in people's lives. If you've never tuned in before, Life Inspired is all about life was going along and there was a ... moment where and then God stepped in and changed your trajectory, and like a turning point moment to where you are now walking an inspired life. And so we love to have guests come and tell sometimes one story, sometimes multiple turning point stories in their lives. And my friend Melody Brandt is on the red couch. Thank you for coming, Melody. We're so glad you could come today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's exciting.
So I know your story is a really long one. We've had some conversations before we sat here and started recording, and we got lots going on. So what's God got on your heart? What do you need to share today?
Well, I think the big thing I need to share today is just that God is so faithful and trustworthy, and that if anyone is struggling with fear, that He is someone that we can completely trust. And I feel like my life has been, like you said, a series of ... moments. Just a little background. I was raised in a Christian home that I thought at the time was Christian, and my parents were divorced when I was 4, and then without putting any blame or shame upon my parents, both of them went on to have multiple marriages. My mother was remarried 3 more times before I was finished with the 4th grade. We moved a lot. There was a lot of different men and relationships in my life, and I just learned at a very young age not to trust men and to be fearful of lots of things. So that's kind of the beginnings of my early years. And but when I was 5, my mother had sent us, there was this church bus ministry from First Baptist Church of Azusa, and they had this big green bus.
And this is California.
In California, where I grew up. And bus driver Tom said that when I was old enough to climb up the steps of the bus, I could start going to Sunday school. So I remember my brother picking me up and putting me on the first step, and I had to be able to get on the bus by myself. And so I started attending Sunday school.
Wow. And
my mom stayed home and watched, it was called The Hour of Power. It was,
I remember that.
Yeah. And I kind of back in the 70s didn't feel really accepted, kind of just a very hurting person. And I think just was afraid of a lot of things. And so she kind of stayed out of that, but sent us to church. And I remember accepting Jesus as my Savior when I was around 4 or 5 with Miss Murray, silver-haired, wonderful woman of God, prayed with me. And I prayed this prayer. And I asked Jesus to come into my heart. I asked him to forgive me of my sins. And then the last thing she said was, and pray that he'll make you a good girl. And I said, and I pray that you'll make me a good girl. And that was the start of years and years and years and years of trying to be a good girl.
Of you trying to be a good girl.
Right.
Yourself.
Yes. And went through the teen years of going to summer camp and, becoming a Christian, and then the next year thinking, oh, I'm not a Christian, I don't love God, and just that constant repetition of, I'm just not good enough, I'm going to try harder. And then when I was in college, I went to this conference in 1988 up in San Francisco, where I actually met Robert. And they were covering 3 topics. They were covering master, mate, and mission. So God's plan for you, as your master, his plan for your mate, and his purpose for your mission in life. And that conference, I felt like for the first time I heard about grace, and that I didn't deserve what God had done for me. That there was nothing I could do to earn that, and that was kind of a beginning of a ... turning moment for me, because I laid my life down there at that conference, and I said, okay, God, no longer is it, I'm a Christian and Jesus is my co-pilot, and it's like, no, you're in charge. what do you want for me? And so that was a huge change at that moment. And
He didn't want to be your co-pilot.
Yeah.
He wants to be your pilot.
Yeah, and
you just ride
yeah.
and enjoy.
And so that's kind of where I was with that. And then during that weekend, they also talked about, your mate. And so I was laying that down before the Lord, because for a while I didn't want to be married at all.
Ever.
I just was like,
not getting married. That didn't work for my mom.
Yeah, it didn't work for my mom or my dad. And it was scary because it's pain. That's all that is pain. And didn't want to have children because I was like, no, I'm gonna be a field news reporter and travel and do a little theater on the side. And but God just asked me to give that to him that weekend, and I really felt in my heart that he wanted me to be a pastor's wife at that weekend. And I remember they asked us to give the testimonies. They were passing the mic around to the people in the crowd about like, what has God done this weekend? And I said, well, I really feel that the Lord wants me to be a pastor's wife. And everybody kind of chuckled. I said, I'm not dating anybody, but, I'm not going to wait for him to come dropping out of the sky. But I kind of just feel that's what the Lord's doing. And my husband, Robert, was in the front row, turned around and looked at me. And that's kind of...
Did you even know him at the time? Had you met him?
I had met him a couple of months earlier. I knew a friend of mine from college. And then the night before, we had talked for a really long time after one of the conferences or the sessions, and I was like, wow.
Like, I kind of like this guy.
I'm going to marry somebody that I could talk to like this, And anyway, he kind of gave me that eye contact when I gave my testimony.